I'd like to talk about some of the lessons I've learned running a successful campaign and seeing it through the end and delivering the rewards. So I may have to cheat and look at my monitor, so hopefully you'll forgive me for that. But I think the first thing that's really important to note is that you should try and create something that's a cause and not a project. And this is something I think I blogged about, but it's sort of a nebulous thing. But the idea is you want something people can get excited about, like a cause. So, for example, Double Fine Adventure. Well, I mean, I love Broken Age, but back in the day, there was no game, there was no anything. It was just an idea. It was a cause, and the cause was, hey, we should make adventure games. Those were cool, and that was the cause that I, was excited about, and I backed that. A lot of people backed that. And I mean, obviously, I'm not saying you should put your project up on Kickstarter when you have no information about it. I mean, that only works if you're Tim Schafer. But what I'm saying is that you have to look at your project and say, how can I get people really invested in it? And so for Neverending Nightmares, I like the game Neverending Nightmares. Some people do. The thing about the Kickstarter, and I think some people who, I do surveys sometimes, I think there's some people who, weren't really that big on the game, but felt they were satisfied with their pledge. And I obviously didn't ask them for specifics in that, but I think why I was able to do that was because I created a cause. Let's create a game that brings, the topic of mental illness to, as something to discuss. And so, if you can, obviously this doesn't work for other games, for every game, but it's nice to frame things as, this is accomplishing something more than a game. You're participating in a movement, you're participating in change rather than, here's a product that seems cool. And I mean, like, even if you look at the Ouya, which is very much a product, they didn't say, here's a box that runs Android. They said, here's a micro console that's changing the way we have entertainment, and we're going up against the giants, and we're this indie company, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's something people can get excited about if you say it's a Tegra 3 in a box with an HDMI port and a game controller. That's, exciting to a small set of people, but that's not what Ouya wanted to deliver, obviously, and that's not something people would get excited about. So I think this is one of the reasons why retro games are so successful. People, it's almost like a cause. Why don't they make games like they used to? Why isn't this type of genre being satisfied? And so that's a good piece of advice for marketing your Kickstarter campaign. And certainly it's a hard one to try and map to it. But I mean, I think you can take a lot of games and say, this is something cool. Like, I was reading about Axiom Verge, which is this new Metroidvania, and there was some funny quotes, which is like, I guess someone said to Reggie, who's, I don't know, vice president of Nintendo, they're making Metroid because you guys stopped making Metroid. So I mean, like, even something like that, like, we want, Metroid isn't being made, so here's the next best thing, or something along those lines. So now I've totally forgotten all my other points, so let me check over. Oh, here's an interesting one. Digital rewards are not always cheaper than physical rewards, and this is something that was very surprising to me, and certainly there's a number of people that say we don't want any physical rewards. we're going to do all digital and we don't want to, you know, touch an envelope or whatever. And I mean, certainly I respect that, and I think it to some extent it limits what you can do. But at least we've found that, you know, actually creating things, digital or physical, can have significant costs in terms of artist time. So, like, the custom backer portraits were really challenging for us. And there's various reasons. I think I've talked about that before. But, you know, I mean, I guess we did provide a printout, which just made it more complicated. But even just getting the ones that we promised in-game, I mean, I think that was the trickiest part. Then, like, we had, like, the digital art book, which I estimated the cost of the digital art book to be about $0 to create a digital art book. Like, throw some files in a PDF, done. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. I forget. I put in a Kickstarter update, but there's like 120 hours or something spent on the art book, and I would say most of that was solely for the digital. You know, well, it worked for digital and physical, but the digital was, you know, was the physical wasn't much harder. I just had to do some Photoshop macros to get the bleed like I wanted, but yeah, so that was an interesting surprise. And then we ran into a position where, like, with the t-shirts, I think our t-shirt cost was about $7 per shirt, which I was shooting for about $3.50 a shirt for my goal. But what we had was a design with a lot of details, and so we went with OO shirts, which is a good company, but they don't put a lot of care into the printing, and that's sort of passed on to the quality of the garments, which, I mean, isn't a bad. I mean, I've used OO shirts for, you know, 2 rounds of retrograde shirts, and then the first round of Neverending Nightmares shirts, and the Neverending Nightmares shirts, you know, were problematic, and there was some back and forth about it being too high detail, and I talked to one customer service rep who told me the different thing than another one. Anyway, but anyway, what happened was the shirt design didn't print well. There was the character of Thomas. His face was like totally white, just like this big white bulb, which was not how we wanted it. So anyway, we decided that we would, or at least I decided that, hey, we would get designs for another t-shirt, and you know, one that would print well. And we did a couple concepts, and nothing was looking remotely cool. So then we ended up going for, you know, basically twice the cost for the garment, and working with a company that did really complicated printing. It was like a 3-color process. There was like a white base coat, and then black, and then more white, or something like that. I don't know what they did, but the shirts definitely had the level of detail we wanted. So, you know, but that was the case, and I guess it's not a pure physical reward thing, but that was a situation where, you know, we saved labor time, which is not cheap for, you know, physical goods. And I think that's something to think about, is if you're evaluating your team's time as 0, then that's a bad thing. That's not a good business move, because, you know, even if you're finished with the project, and certainly we tried to do a lot of rewards once we're finished with the project, but even if you are, then presumably you want to make the next project, or you want to patch your project, or port your project. So definitely, you know, and certainly if you're just a student, you're just starting out, this is your first game, it's easy to say, oh, my time's worth 0, but it really isn't. Anyway, let me see. So, I think a lot of people have tried kickstarting, you know, popular projects on, like, non-PC Mac Linux platforms, and it's a big struggle. I think, if you're making games and you're on Kickstarter, PC Mac Linux are your bare minimum platforms you should support. And I mean, one could argue, oh, maybe you don't need to support Linux, but I think there's a very big community of Linux gamers who are active on Kickstarter, because, Linux gaming is really cool because, people really want it to happen, and they're willing to put their money where their mouth is, and so I think you do get, a disproportionate amount of backers on Kickstarter who are interested in Linux or Mac. But, like, Amplitude had a big problem with their Kickstarter, and apparently there's, like, 20% of their budget is from, like, unallocated funds or something, which probably means, some people were just infusing massive amounts of cash to make it happen. Well, I mean, I don't know what happened, but, I mean, usually that's not a good sign if there's, hundreds of thousands of dollars in your project. That does not map to a reward tier. That isn't a sign of project health, at least in my opinion. And certainly Republic, which is a really interesting game and really wanted to do something cool in the mobile space, ran into a lot of problems. Because a lot of backers are saying, well, this is cool, but where's the platforms we care about? And also, I think, iOS, you're kind of screwed on fulfilling your orders, and I don't know how Republic did it. I think they may have just made it like 99 cents for a day or something. I don't know. But it's definitely not optimal, especially for fulfillment. And a lot of things, have like console stretch goals, which usually people don't anticipate how much it costs to do console development. It's not cheap, I can say from experience. But also, you may have to pay for those keys. I don't know. But I suspect that those keys aren't free, like Steam keys. And if the keys aren't free, then that throws your whole budget out of whack in terms of what you're willing to, or what you're making versus what you're what the project is bringing in versus what the project I'm messing this up, but sort of the revenue versus cost of your project. So like, we shot for like 90% goes towards development, 10% goes to rewards, and if depending on the number of console keys we had to give out, that balance might have shifted, assuming we hit some stretch goals. So, I mean, like, if I were doing a console stretch goal, I would make it much further than just the cost of development, because I would now have to balance those, keys, because I want the console keys, right? If they're offering a console key, I will always say yes, I'll prefer the console key, which kind of makes me a jerk, but I mean, the alternative is to do something like Shovel Knight, where they charge extra for the console keys, more than the actual price of the game on the console, which is kind of weird. Like, I don't want Kickstarter backers to be getting a worse deal, I want them to be getting a better deal. So then also, I think update frequently. I've talked about this all the time. Kickstarter backers want to know what's going on. Or, even if they're not reading every update, they can go and read them if they're curious why your game is 10 months late or whatever. So updating frequently is really important. The last thing I want to say, it's kind of a weird one, but at least for us, I think it's, focus testing is very important. It's very important to have people play your game and see what they think. And we had great results using backers as focus testers, but I think, we basically only use backers for focus testers, and we didn't get a lot of people who weren't really invested in the game, or weren't really, enthusiastic about the game to play it. And so I think it's good to bring in other focus testers so you can get sort of outside opinions, people who aren't really digging your thing right off the bat, and see what they think. Because I think, Neverending Nightmares succeeds more for the Kickstarter backers than it did for the general public. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I think, there were some things we could have changed had we gotten more, sort of general feedback that would have improved the game for everyone, backers included. Anyway, that's all I have for this video, so thanks for watching.